Elena Reyes wiped the sweat from her brow as she polished the gleaming marble floor of the East Wing. The summer heat had found its way even into the air-conditioned mansion, making her uniform stick uncomfortably to her back. 6 hours into her shift, and she still had the music room and 3 guest bathrooms to clean before she could head home to her tiny apartment. The Harrington estate sprawled across 5 acres of perfectly manicured lawns and gardens. From the outside, it looked like something from a fairy tale, all stone walls and ivy with tall windows that caught the sunlight. Inside, it was just as beautiful, but to Elena, each gorgeous room simply meant more surfaces to dust, more floors to mop, and more precious objects she couldn't afford to break. Mr. Nathaniel Harrington, her employer, was hosting another of his famous dinner parties that evening. The household had been in a frenzy for days. Elena had overheard the other staff talking about the guest list, senators, business leaders, and even a famous conductor from the city orchestra. Not that any of it mattered to her. She'd be long gone before they arrived, back to her small studio apartment where she'd eat a simple dinner before falling asleep, exhausted. "Miss Reyes," a stern voice called, making Elena jump. She turned to find Mrs. Porter, the head housekeeper, standing in the doorway with her ever-present clipboard. "When you've finished here, please help in the kitchen. The caterers are running behind and we need all hands on deck." Elena nodded respectfully. "Yes, Mrs. Porter, I'll be there in 15 minutes. Mrs. Porter's tight bun didn't move an inch as she nodded back. Unlike most of the staff, she had always treated Elena with basic respect. Not warmth. Mrs. Porter wasn't warm with anyone, but respect. As the housekeeper walked away, Elena returned to her work, moving the mop in practice circles across the floor. She'd been working at the Harrington mansion for almost 2 years now, ever since she'd arrived in the country. The pay was better than most places would offer someone with her background, and she needed every penny. Back home in Mexico, her younger sister Lucia was in her 2nd year of medical school. Their parents had passed away 4 years ago. Their father from a heart attack, their mother from what the doctors called natural causes, but what Elena knew was really a broken heart. Since then, Elena had taken on the role of provider, setting aside her own dreams to make sure Lucia could achieve hers. A buzz from her pocket broke her concentration. Checking that no one was around, Elena pulled out her phone to see a message from Lucia, along with a photo of her smiling in a white lab coat. "First day of clinical rotations. Thank you for making this possible, Hermana. Te quiero mucho." Elena's eyes misted over as she looked at her sister's proud face. This was why she scrubbed floors and cleaned toilets in a house where the owner didn't even know her name. This was why she worked extra shifts whenever they were offered. This was why she had set aside her own passion. She slipped the phone back into her pocket and moved toward the final corner of the room. As she worked, Elena hummed softly to herself, a habit her mother had always teased her about. "Even when you wash dishes, you make music," she used to say. Music. Once, it had been everything to Elena. For 12 years, she had studied piano at the community music school back home, earning a scholarship to the National Conservatory in Mexico City at 16. For 2 blissful years, she had immersed herself in Chopin and Bach, Beethoven and Debussy. Her teachers had spoken of competitions, of a potential career. Then her father died, and everything changed. Elena shook her head, pushing the memories away. No use thinking about what might have been. She finished the floor and gathered her cleaning supplies, heading toward the kitchen as instructed. As she passed the music room, she paused, glancing at the magnificent, grand piano that sat in the center like a sleeping black beast. Mr. Harrington rarely played. She'd been told he kept it mostly for show, but occasionally hired musicians for his events. The kitchen was chaos when she arrived. Staff bustled about, caterers shouted orders, and the head chef was having what looked like a heated argument with Mrs. Porter about the timing of the main course. "Ah, Elena," called out Jorge, one of the kitchen helpers who had started around the same time she had. "Can you help with the appetizer platters? We're running behind." For the next hour, Elena carefully arranged tiny pieces of food onto silver platters, following the chef's precise instructions. Around her, the stress in the room was palpable. Mr. Harrington's parties were notorious for needing to be perfect. Stories circulated among the staff about people being fired on the spot for the smallest mistakes. Elena had only seen him up close a handful of times in her 2 years of employment. Nathaniel Harrington was in his early 40s, with salt and pepper hair always styled impeccably, and suits that probably cost more than she made in 6 months. His face seemed permanently set in an expression of mild disapproval, as if the world consistently failed to meet his standards. "He's on a rampage today," whispered Jorge as they worked side by side. The pianist canceled last minute. "Some family emergency," Elena winced. "That's not good." "Not good? It's a disaster. You know how he is about his musical entertainment. Remember when that violinist showed up wearing the wrong color tie?" Elena did remember. The poor man had been escorted out before playing a single note, all because his tie was navy instead of black. A crash from the hallway made everyone freeze. Elena recognized the sound of Mr. Harrington's voice immediately, though she couldn't make out the words. He was clearly upset, his tone sharp and cutting. Mrs. Porter appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face even more pinched than usual. "The pianist has indeed canceled. Mr. Harrington is displeased." This was an understatement, judging by the continued sounds of angry ranting from the direction of the main hall. "Can't he get a replacement?" asked one of the caterers. Mrs. Porter shook her head. "Not with only 4 hours' notice. Not someone of the caliber he demands." They all returned to work, the tension in the room even thicker than before. Elena tried to focus on the delicate placement of caviar and microgreens, but her hands had begun to tremble slightly. An angry Mr. Harrington meant an unpleasant evening for everyone, even those who would be gone before the party began. As if on cue, the kitchen door swung open with such force that it banged against the wall. Everyone jumped. Nathaniel Harrington stood in the doorway, his expensive suit jacket discarded, the sleeves of his shirt rolled up as if ready for a fight. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice eerily calm now but somehow more frightening than when he had been shouting. "I have the director of the symphony coming tonight, along with 3 potential investors for the new Performing Arts Center." The musical interlude was to be a key talking point. No one spoke. No one even moved. "Mrs. Porter," he continued, "call the agency again. Tell them I'll pay triple their usual rate." "I've already tried, sir," she replied. "They simply don't have anyone available on such short notice." Mr. Harrington's jaw tightened. He scanned the room slowly, his gaze passing over each person as if assessing their worth. When his eyes landed on Elena, she quickly looked down at the platter she was arranging. "What about the staff?" he asked suddenly. "Surely one of you must play something. Piano, violin, anything." The silence that followed was deafening. Elena kept her eyes fixed firmly on the food in front of her. "No one?"
he asked, incredulity creeping into his voice.
"Not a single person?" Jorge cleared his throat nervously. "I played guitar in high school, sir, but nothing useful for tonight, I imagine." Mr. Harrington cut him off dismissively. His gaze continued to sweep the room until it settled once more on Elena, who was now carefully placing the last garnish on her platter. "You," he said, pointing directly at her. "What's your name?" Elena froze, a tiny herb still pinched between her fingers. She looked up slowly, certain he must be addressing someone else. But no, his eyes were locked on hers. "Elena Reyes, sir," she answered, her voice barely audible. "Do you play any instruments, Elena Reyes?" She hesitated, her heart beginning to race. She could feel everyone's eyes on her. "I used to, sir." Mr. Harrington's eyebrows rose slightly, the first sign of something other than annoyance crossing his face. "What instrument?" "Piano, sir. But it was a long time ago." A strange smile spread across his face, not warm but calculating. "How fortunate. It seems we found our entertainment for the evening." Elena's stomach dropped. "Sir, I haven't played seriously in years." "I couldn't possibly call nonsense," he interrupted. "It's like riding a bicycle, isn't it? And I'm not expecting a virtuoso performance. Just something to fill the silence while my guests enjoy their dessert." Mrs. Porter stepped forward. "Mr. Harrington, Elena is part of the cleaning staff. Perhaps someone more qualified." "Is there someone more qualified available, Mrs. Porter?" he asked sharply. "No, sir, but then it's settled." He turned back to Elena. "You'll play tonight. 3 pieces should suffice. Something classical, nothing too ambitious. Mrs. Porter will find you something appropriate to wear." His tone made it clear this was not a request, but an order. Before Elena could protest further, he had turned and left the kitchen, already on his phone arranging some other aspect of the evening. The room remained silent for several seconds after his departure. Then slowly everyone returned to their tasks. though Elena noticed several sympathetic glances thrown her way. Mrs. Porter approached her, looking genuinely concerned for perhaps the first time since Elena had known her. "Can you actually play, Elena?" she asked quietly. Elena nodded slowly, still in shock. "Yes, but not at the level he'll be expecting." "Not anymore," the older woman sighed. "Well, do your best. That's all any of us can do with him." She checked her watch. "Finish that platter, then come find me. We'll need to sort out your appearance." As Mrs. Porter walked away, Elena felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Jorge, his face full of sympathy. "Buena suerte," he said. "Good luck." Elena would need more than luck. As she carefully finished the platter of appetizers, her mind raced through the pieces she once knew by heart. Would her fingers remember what her mind had tried to forget? Could she still play well enough to avoid humiliation? Or worse, termination? She thought of Lucia's smiling face in the photo, of the tuition payment due next month. She couldn't lose this job. With trembling hands, Elena placed the last garnish and picked up the completed platter. Tonight, for the first time in years, she would play again. Not for herself, not for the joy of it, but for a man who didn't even know her name until 5 minutes ago. A man who saw her as nothing more than another servant to command. But as she carried the platter toward the dining room, a strange feeling began to stir within her. Somewhere between terror and anticipation. It had been so long since her fingers had touched piano keys. Despite everything, despite the circumstances, a tiny part of her wondered, what if the music was still there, waiting? Elena sat in a small staff break room staring at her hands. These hands had scrubbed toilets this morning. Now they were supposed to play piano for some of the most important people in the city. She flexed her fingers, noting the calluses and the slightly raw skin from the cleaning products. Once these hands had been her pride, kept moisturized, nails carefully trimmed to the perfect length for playing. Now they were working hands telling the story of her daily life better than words ever could. 10 minutes, Elena," Mrs. Porter announced, appearing at the doorway with what looked like a garment bag. "I've found something for you to wear." Elena nodded, still unable to believe what was happening. The past hour had been a blur. After Mr. Harrington's decree, she'd been pulled from her regular duties. Mrs. Porter had allowed her 30 minutes in the music room to practice on the grand piano, the first time Elena had touched such a fine instrument in years. Those 30 minutes had been both wonderful and terrible. Her fingers remembered more than she expected, but they also felt stiff and slow. Notes that once flowed easily now required concentration, and the pressure of knowing why she was practicing made her hands shake. Mrs. Porter hung the garment bag on a hook on the wall and unzipped it. Inside was a simple black dress, elegant but not showy. "This belongs to Gabriella from the weekend staff. She's about your size and left it here for events. She said you can borrow it." Elena touched the fabric gratefully. "Please thank her for me." Mrs. Porter nodded, then hesitated. "Elena, I tried to talk him out of this. It's not fair to put you in this position." Elena managed a small smile. "It's fine, Mrs. Porter, I'll do my best. That's all any of us can do here." The older woman sighed. "I'll give you privacy to change. The bathroom is down the hall if you need to freshen up. There's some basic makeup in the drawer if you want it." After Mrs. Porter left, Elena quickly changed into the black dress. It fit well enough. A bit loose around the waist, but the length was perfect. She went to the small bathroom and looked at herself in the mirror. Her dark hair was still neatly pulled back in its usual work bun, but now it looked too severe. She took out the pins and let her hair fall to her shoulders, running her fingers through it to give it some shape. The drawer contained some basic makeup as promised. Elena applied a light layer of foundation, a touch of blush, and some mascara. Nothing fancy, but enough to look presentable. As she worked, she tried to calm the storm inside her. What pieces should she play? During her practice time, she'd tried a few of the pieces she used to know by heart. Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major came back to her fairly well. A simpler Mozart sonata seemed manageable. For a third piece, perhaps the Bach prelude she'd always loved. None were particularly impressive choices for someone who had studied at a conservatory, but they were the safest options given her rusty skills. A knock at the door startled her. 5 minutes, Elena," called Mrs. Porter's voice. "The guests are finishing their main course." Elena took a deep breath, looking at herself one more time in the mirror. "You can do this," she whispered to her reflection. "Just get through it." She thought again of her sister Lucia. of the tuition payments, of the life she was helping to build back home. That's what mattered, not some rich man's party. When she emerged from the bathroom, Jorge was waiting with Mrs. Porter. "Wow," he said, eyes widening. "You clean up nice, Elena." She gave him a nervous smile. "Thanks. The kitchen staff is rooting for you," he added. "We're all hoping you knock their fancy socks off." His support warmed her heart but also increased the pressure. Now it wasn't just about keeping her job. It was about representing all of them, the invisible workers who kept this mansion running. Mrs. Porter led her through the service corridors toward the main part of the house. As they walked, Elena could hear the murmur of conversation and the clink of silverware. "Mr. Harrington will introduce you after they've been served dessert," Mrs. Porter explained. "Just walk to the piano, bow slightly, and begin. 3 pieces should take about 15 minutes. Then bow again and leave." Elena nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. They reached a side door to the main dining room. Through the crack, Elena could see the glittering scene inside. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over a long table where about 20 people sat in their finery. Silver and china gleamed. Floral arrangements created bursts of color. Servers moved silently between the guests, placing delicate dessert plates in front of each person. At the head of the table sat Nathaniel Harrington, looking completely at ease, laughing at something the woman next to him had said. Elena found it hard to believe this was the same man who had been shouting in rage just hours earlier. "Remember," Mrs. Porter whispered, 3 pieces, then you're done. You'll be back in your regular clothes and heading home before you know it." Elena nodded again, her heart pounding so hard she worried it might be visible through the black dress. Inside the dining room, she saw Mr. Harrington rise to his feet, tapping his water glass gently with a spoon. The conversation died down as all eyes turned to him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and cultured, nothing like the harsh tone he used with his staff. "While we enjoy Chef Michel's magnificent creme brulee, I've arranged for a little musical interlude." He paused, and Elena saw a flicker of something cross his face. Was it embarrassment? Uncertainty? Due to an unfortunate last-minute cancellation, we have a somewhat unconventional performance this evening. One of our household staff has kindly agreed to step in. There were murmurs around the table. Elena felt her cheeks burn. Kindly agreed, as if she'd had a choice. So without further ado, Mr. Harrington continued, gesturing toward the piano in the corner of the room. "Please welcome Elena." Mrs. Porter gave her a gentle push, and suddenly Elena was walking into the room, feeling the weight of every gaze. She kept her eyes on the piano, not daring to look at the guests. The black Steinway grand gleamed under the chandelier lights, its lid propped open, exposing the complex machinery within. Elena reached the piano and turned, giving a small bow as Mrs. Porter had instructed. Then she quickly sat down, grateful to no longer be standing on display. The bench felt too high. The keys looked both familiar and foreign. Her fingers trembled as she placed them in position for the nocturne. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Then she began to play. The first few notes came out hesitantly, her fingers still remembering the way. But as she continued, something started to change. The muscle memory began to return, bringing with it echoes of countless hours spent practicing this very piece. Her fingers found their old confidence, moving more freely across the keys. Elena closed her eyes, letting the music flow through her. She'd always loved this nocturne for its gentle melancholy, its sense of longing. Now, playing it after so many years, she felt that longing even more deeply, for the life she might have had, for the music that had once been her everything. When she finished the piece, there was a moment of silence, then polite applause. Elena didn't look up. She moved directly into the Mozart sonata, her confidence growing with each measure. This piece was happier, more playful, and she found herself smiling slightly as her fingers danced through a particularly tricky passage that had given her trouble during her brief practice session. The applause after the second piece was warmer. Elena finally allowed herself a glance at the audience. The guests were watching her with interest now, some of them leaning forward in their chairs. At the head of the table, Mr. Harrington's expression was unreadable. For her final piece, Elena chose the Bach prelude. As she played the opening notes, she remembered her old teacher saying that Bach was mathematics made beautiful. The precise patterns created a framework that was somehow both structured and deeply emotional. Elena surrendered to it completely, no longer thinking about the guests or her job or even her rusty technique. She was just playing, truly playing for the first time in years. When the final notes faded away, the silence lasted longer than before. Then the applause began, stronger, more enthusiastic. Elena rose from the bench and bowed again, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of relief and unexpected joy. As she straightened, she finally allowed herself to look directly at the dinner guests. They were smiling, some nodding appreciatively. An older man near the end of the table, distinguished looking, with a shock of white hair, was watching her with particular interest. Elena's gaze finally found Mr. Harrington. She expected to see relief, perhaps, or the satisfied look of someone whose impromptu plan had worked out well enough. Instead, she saw something that stunned her. He looked completely taken aback. His usual composed mask dropped to reveal genuine surprise. Their eyes met briefly, and Elena thought she detected a flicker of, was it shame? Embarrassment? Before she could decide, he broke the eye contact, rising to his feet once more. "Thank you, Elena," he said, his voice slightly different than before. "That was unexpectedly lovely." She nodded in acknowledgement, unsure what to say. Then, following Mrs. Porter's instructions, she turned and walked toward the side door where the housekeeper was waiting. As she reached the door, she heard a voice call out, "Excuse me." Elena turned back to find the white-haired man on his feet. "May I ask?" he said, his voice carrying clearly across the room. "Where you studied?" The question hung in the air. Elena felt all eyes on her again, but differently now, not as a servant forced to perform, but as a musician being taken seriously. "The National Conservatory in Mexico City, sir," she answered. "For 2 years." Murmurs rippled through the room. Elena saw Mr. Harrington's eyebrows rise slightly. "I thought as much," the white-haired man said, nodding. "You have a beautiful touch. Thank you for sharing your gift with us tonight." Elena felt her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "Thank you, sir," she managed before slipping through the door where Mrs. Porter waited. Once in the hallway, the housekeeper surprised her by squeezing her arm gently. "You were wonderful," she said, her usual stern demeanor softened. "Absolutely wonderful." Elena blinked back tears as the door closed behind them, cutting off the sound of renewed conversation from the dining room. For a moment she'd been seen, really seen, not as Elena the maid, but as Elena the pianist. And despite everything, despite the circumstances that had put her on that bench, it felt like coming home. Elena changed back into her uniform in the staff break room, her hands still tingling from playing the piano. The black dress hung neatly on its hanger, ready to be returned to Gabriella. As she tied her hair back into its practical bun, Elena couldn't quite process what had just happened. She had played, really played, and people had listened not out of obligation or pity, but because something in her music had reached them. A knock on the door broke her reverie. "Come in," she called, expecting Mrs. Porter with instructions about finishing her duties before heading home. Instead, Jorge poked his head in, his face split with a huge grin. "You're famous," he announced, stepping into the room. "Everyone in the kitchen is talking about you." Maria said she could hear the music all the way back here, and it was beautiful. Elena smiled, embarrassed by the attention. "I just played what I remembered." "Well, what you remembered was amazing. You should have seen the boss's face. He looked like someone had just told him his stocks crashed." Elena frowned. "That doesn't sound good." No, Jorge laughed. Not angry, more like shocked, like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Before Elena could respond, Mrs. Porter appeared in the doorway, her usual composed expression back in place. "Elena," she said, "Mr. Harrington would like to see you in his study." Jorge's eyes widened, and he gave Elena a concerned look. She felt her stomach drop. Was Mr. Harrington upset? Had she embarrassed him somehow? "Now?" Elena asked. "Yes, he's just excused himself from his guests for a few minutes. He asked to speak with you privately." Elena nodded, smoothing her uniform nervously. "Of course." As she followed Mrs. Porter through the service corridors, Elena's mind raced. Maybe he thought she had been hiding her abilities, misleading him about her skills when she was hired. Maybe he was angry that she'd shown him up in front of his guests. Rich people like him didn't like surprises, especially ones that made them look foolish. Mrs. Porter must have sensed her anxiety. "Don't worry," she said quietly. "You did nothing wrong. Quite the opposite. reached the heavy oak door of Mr. Harrington's study. Mrs. Porter knocked firmly. "Enter," called the familiar voice. Mrs. Porter opened the door and stepped aside for Elena to pass. "Miss Reyes, sir, as requested." "Thank you." "Mrs. Porter, that will be all." The housekeeper nodded and withdrew, closing the door behind her. Elena stood just inside the doorway, hands clasped in front of her, eyes lowered respectfully as she'd been taught to do in the presence of her employer. Mr. Harrington's study was an impressive room lined with bookshelves, a massive desk dominating one end. He stood by the window looking out at the darkened gardens, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. For a moment he didn't speak or turn around. "You studied at the National Conservatory," he finally said, still facing the window. "Yes, sir, for 2 years. And yet you work as a maid." It wasn't quite a question, but Elena answered anyway. "Yes, sir." He turned then, studying her with an intensity that made her want to shrink back against the door. "Why?" he asked simply. Elena hesitated. She had never discussed her personal life with Mr. Harrington. He had never asked, never shown any interest in who she was beyond her ability to clean his house. "My father died," she said finally. "We needed money. My sister was still in school." "So you left your studies to support your family?" "Yes, sir." Mr. Harrington took a sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving her face. "And you've been working here for almost 2 years, sir?" He nodded slowly as if confirming something to himself. 2 years? And in those 2 years you never once mentioned that you were a trained pianist. It never seemed relevant, sir." "Relevant?" He raised an eyebrow. "I have a Steinway grand piano that sits mostly unused. I host regular gatherings where I hire musicians. And you didn't think your training was relevant?" Put that way, it did sound odd. Elena struggled to explain. "When I came here, I was looking for work as a housekeeper. That's what I was hired to do. I didn't think—" She trailed off, unsure how to continue without sounding accusatory. "You didn't think I would be interested in your other skills," he finished for her. "And based on how I've treated you for the past 2 years, that was a reasonable assumption." Elena looked up in surprise. Was that self-awareness in his voice? Mr. Harrington set his glass down on a side table and walked closer. "I owe you an apology, Miss Reyes, both for today and, it seems, for quite some time." "Sir?" "I put you in an uncomfortable position today. I ordered you to perform like some sort of trained animal. It was disrespectful and I apologize." Elena was too stunned to respond. In 2 years she had never heard Mr. Harrington apologize to anyone, let alone a member of his household staff. "Furthermore," he continued, "I've been employing you for 2 years without bothering to learn anything about you. That's also disrespectful. And tonight I discovered it was also rather foolish on my part." He walked to his desk and picked up a business card. "Do you know who Dr. Victor Laurent is?" Elena shook her head. "He's the director of the City Symphony Orchestra. He was quite impressed by your playing tonight. In fact, he gave me this to pass along to you." Mr. Harrington held out the business card. Elena took it hesitantly, reading the elegant typography. "Dr. Victor Laurent, musical director, City Symphony Orchestra. He'd like you to call him," Mr. Harrington explained. "I believe he wants to discuss opportunities. Scholarships, perhaps." Elena stared at the card in her hand, trying to make sense of what was happening. I don't understand." "It seems, Miss Reyes, that you've been wasting your talent cleaning my floors." There was a hint of a smile on his face now, softening his usually stern features. "Dr. Laurent thinks you should be doing something else with your hands." I find myself agreeing with him. Hope fluttered in Elena's chest, but she quickly tamped it down. "Sir, I appreciate this, but I need this job." "My sister is in medical school, I believe you said?" "Yes, sir, in Mexico. I send money home each month for her tuition." Mr. Harrington nodded thoughtfully. "What if I told you there might be a way for you to pursue your music without abandoning your sister?" Elena waited, hardly daring to breathe. "I have some connections with the university's music department. There are scholarships available, programs designed for talented musicians who need financial support. If you're accepted, and after what I heard tonight, I have no doubt you would be, you could receive a stipend that would allow you to study while still supporting your sister." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Elena steadied herself against the back of a nearby chair. "Why would you do this for me?" Mr. Harrington looked genuinely surprised by the question. "Because you have a gift, Miss Reyes. One that should be nurtured, not buried under household duties. He paused. And perhaps because I owe you a debt for how I've overlooked you these past 2 years. Elena looked down at the business card again, tracing her finger over the embossed lettering. Could this really be happening? After all this time, could she find her way back to music? I don't expect you to decide anything tonight, Mr. Harrington said. Take some time to think about it. Call Dr. Laurent, explore your options. And my job here? Elena asked, practical concerns pushing through her days of possibilities. Your position is secure for as long as you need it. But I'd like to make an adjustment if you're agreeable. He gestured toward the door. I think it's time we brought the Steinway back to life. If you'd be willing, I'd like to add music practice to your duties. Paid practice time, of course. The piano should be played, and clearly you're the one who should be playing it. Elena couldn't stop the smile that spread across her face. I would like that very much, sir. Excellent. We can discuss the details tomorrow. For now, I should return to my guests. He picked up his glass. Unless there's anything else? Elena hesitated, then gathered her courage. There is one thing, sir. The white-haired gentleman, Dr. Laurent. What exactly did he say about my playing? Mr. Harrington's expression softened further. He said, and I quote, "That young woman has more natural talent in her little finger than half the professionals I work with." He also mentioned something about your interpretation of Bach being particularly insightful. Warmth bloomed in Elena's chest. Professional validation from someone like Dr. Laurent meant more than she could express. Thank you for telling me that, sir. Mr. Harrington nodded. You should be proud, Miss Reyes. Not many people can silence a room full of chattering socialites with just a piano. For the first time in their 2-year employer-employee relationship, they shared a genuine smile. You may go now, he said. I imagine you've had quite enough excitement for one evening. And I believe your workday officially ended 2 hours ago. Thank you, sir. Elena moved toward the door, then paused with her hand on the knob. Mr. Harrington, yes? The party, your guests. Was it? Did it work out all right? With the music, I mean. He looked at her with newfound respect. Miss Reyes, thanks to you, this dinner party will be remembered long after the food has been forgotten. He raised his glass in a small toast. You saved the evening, and perhaps opened a door for yourself in the process. Elena left the study in a daze, the business card clutched tightly in her hand. The corridor seemed brighter somehow, the air lighter around her. She had come to work this morning as Elena the maid. She would leave tonight as Elena the pianist. Elena the musician. Elena with possibilities stretching out before her. She headed back to the break room, eager to collect her things and get home. She needed to call Lucia. She needed to tell her sister that maybe, just maybe, they would both get to follow their dreams after all. As she walked, Elena began to hum softly to herself, not a classical piece this time, but a simple lullaby her mother used to sing. For the first time in years, the melody didn't bring sadness or regret. Instead, it felt like a connection to her past and a bridge to her future, both honored in the same gentle tune. 3 weeks had passed since the night of Mr. Harrington's dinner party, and Elena's life had begun to shift in ways she could never have imagined. She sat in the waiting area outside Dr. Laurent's office at the Symphony Hall, her hands folded neatly in her lap to hide their trembling. The space around her was elegant but welcoming. Warm wood paneling, comfortable chairs, and framed photos of orchestra performances covering the walls. A glass case nearby displayed programs from notable concerts over the years. Elena had called Dr. Laurent the day after the party, half expecting his secretary to tell her he was too busy. Instead, he had personally taken her call and arranged this meeting. Now dressed in her best clothes, a simple blue dress she'd bought specially for the occasion, she waited, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. The door to the inner office opened and Dr. Laurent himself appeared. He was just as Elena remembered from the dinner party, tall and distinguished with a full head of white hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Miss Reyes, he said warmly, extending his hand. Thank you for coming. Please step into my office. Elena shook his hand and followed him inside. His office was larger than she expected, with a baby grand piano in one corner and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city park. Please sit down, he said, gesturing to a chair across from his desk. Can I offer you something to drink? Coffee? Tea? No, thank you, sir. I'm fine. Dr. Laurent settled into his chair and regarded her with a friendly but appraising look. I must say, Miss Reyes, you gave quite a performance at Nathaniel Harrington's dinner. I was not expecting to discover such talent serving creme brulee. Elena felt her cheeks warm. I wasn't serving that night, sir. I normally work as a housekeeper. Ah, yes. Nathaniel explained the situation to me afterward. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me about your training. So Elena told him about her childhood music lessons in her small hometown, about the dedicated teacher who had helped her prepare for the conservatory auditions, about the 2 precious years of formal training before her father's death changed everything. Dr. Laurent listened attentively, asking occasional questions about her teachers and the repertoire she had studied. And you haven't played regularly since leaving the conservatory? He asked, sounding surprised. No, sir. There was no time and no piano. Until recently, she smiled slightly. Mr. Harrington has been very kind. He's adjusted my schedule to include 2 hours of practice time each day on the Steinway. Has he indeed? Dr. Laurent's eyebrows rose. That doesn't sound like the Nathaniel Harrington I know. You must have made quite an impression. Elena looked down at her hands. I think he felt bad about how things happened. Perhaps. Or perhaps he recognized what I did, that your talent deserves nurturing. He stood up and walked to the piano. Would you mind playing something for me? Something you've been working on during your practice time? Elena's heart jumped into her throat. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to hear how you're progressing. She nodded and moved to the piano bench. This wasn't the Steinway she'd been practicing on, but it was still a beautiful instrument. She placed her fingers on the keys, took a deep breath, and began to play. She had chosen Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece she had been relearning over the past few weeks. It felt right for this moment. Delicate but with hidden depths. Technically challenging but not showy. As she played, she tried to focus only on the music, not on Dr. Laurent watching her or what might hang in the balance. When she finished, Dr. Laurent was silent for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. You have a remarkable touch, Miss Reyes, sensitive, intuitive. Your technique needs refinement, of course. That's to be expected after years away from serious study. But the foundation is there. The musicality is there. Thank you, sir. He returned to his desk and picked up a folder. I've been making some inquiries since we met. There's a scholarship program at the university designed for students in special circumstances. Those who've had to interrupt their education or who come from non-traditional backgrounds. The spring semester begins in January, which would give you several months to prepare. Elena's heartbeat quickened. You think I could qualify? I'm certain of it, especially with my recommendation. He handed her the folder. Here's information about the program, including the audition requirements. The scholarship covers tuition and includes a monthly stipend for living expenses. Elena took the folder with slightly shaking hands. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it seriously. Dr. Laurent smiled. You have a gift, Miss Reyes. I would be very disappointed to see it relegated to a hobby. My sister, Elena began, the practical concerns immediately surfacing. She's in medical school back home. I send money for her tuition every month. Ah, yes. Nathaniel mentioned your situation. Dr. Laurent looked thoughtful. The stipend might not cover both your expenses and your sister's tuition. However, he paused. Would you be open to teaching while you study? We have a community outreach program that offers music lessons to children from low-income families. It pays reasonably well, and your background would make you an excellent candidate. Elena's eyes widened. Teaching piano? The idea had never occurred to her. I've never taught before, she admitted. But you understand what it means to work hard for your music, to sacrifice for it. That perspective is valuable, especially for children who face challenges of their own. He smiled again. Think about it. The position would be part-time, flexible around your class schedule. By the time Elena left Dr. Laurent's office an hour later, her head was spinning with possibilities. The folder in her hand contained not only information about the scholarship program, but also an application for the teaching position and a practice schedule to help her prepare for the audition in November. Outside the symphony hall, the afternoon sun warmed her face as she headed for the bus stop. She had the late shift at the Harrington estate today, starting at 3. Mr. Harrington had rearranged her schedule after their conversation, allowing her mornings for practice and study. The changes in her employer over the past few weeks had been almost as surprising as the changes in her own life. He had become Not friendly, exactly, but respectful in a way he had never been before. He asked about her practice sessions. He left music books on the piano for her to explore. Once, he had even stopped in the music room while she was playing and listened quietly until she finished. The bus ride to the Harrington estate took 40 minutes, giving Elena time to look through the materials Dr. Laurent had given her. The audition requirements were challenging: a Bach prelude and fugue, a complete classical sonata, a romantic piece, and something from the 20th century. It would mean hours of practice, rebuilding her technique, relearning pieces she had once known by heart. Could she really do this? Balance work, study, practice, and possibly teaching? And what about Lucia? Would the teaching job pay enough to continue supporting her sister's education? As the bus approached her stop, Elena put the folder away. One day at a time, she told herself. One step at a time. When she arrived at the Harrington mansion, something felt different. There was an unusual bustle of activity. Delivery people carrying flowers, catering staff setting up in the kitchen, Mrs. Porter directing it all with her usual efficiency. There you are. Elena, the housekeeper said when she spotted her. Mr. Harrington is having an impromptu gathering this evening. Nothing too formal. Just 30 or so guests for cocktails and light refreshments. Would you like me to help with the preparations? Elena asked, slipping her purse and folder into her locker in the staff area. Mrs. Porter looked at her watch. Actually, Mr. Harrington asked to see you in the music room as soon as you arrived. He said it's important. Curious, Elena made her way to the music room. The door was ajar, and she could hear Mr. Harrington's voice inside speaking to someone else. She knocked lightly. Elena, come in, he called. She entered to find Mr. Harrington standing by the piano with a slender, elegant woman she didn't recognize. She appeared to be in her 60s with silver-streaked dark hair pulled into a chignon and an air of quiet authority. Elena, I'd like you to meet Madame Isabella Cortez, Mr. Harrington said. Madame Cortez, this is Elena Reyes, whom I was telling you about. The woman's sharp eyes studied Elena with interest. So you are the housekeeper who plays Chopin? Yes, ma'am, Elena replied, unsure how to respond to the directness of the statement. Madame Cortez was my mother's piano teacher, Mr. Harrington explained. She's retired now but still takes on the occasional student. Special cases, as she puts it. Elena's eyes widened as she realized the implication. It's an honor to meet you, Madame Cortez. The older woman nodded. Nathaniel has told me about your situation. He seems to think you have exceptional talent that requires nurturing. Her tone suggested she was reserving judgment on that assessment. He has asked me to consider taking you as a student in preparation for your university audition. Elena shot a surprised glance at Mr. Harrington, who simply smiled slightly. I've explained to Madame Cortez that you're preparing to audition for the scholarship program at the university, he said. She happens to know the program director quite well. I've trained many successful candidates over the years, Madame Cortez agreed. But I only take students who are serious, who are willing to work hard. I am serious, Elena said, finding her voice. And I'm not afraid of hard work. So I understand. Still, I would need to hear you play before making any decision. Mr. Harrington moved away from the piano. The instrument is all yours, Elena. Elena hesitated only a moment before sitting down at the bench. She thought quickly about what to play, something that would show both her potential and her current limitations. She decided on the first movement of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, a piece she had been working on recently. As she played, she was acutely aware of Madame Cortez's critical gaze. The woman missed nothing, Elena was sure. Every hesitation, every place where her technique faltered. But Elena didn't let that intimidate her. She played with all the feeling she could muster, focusing on the emotional truth of the music rather than technical perfection. When she finished, Madame Cortez was silent for a long moment. Your technique needs work, she finally said bluntly. Your fingering is inconsistent, and you rush the difficult passages instead of working through them properly. Elena nodded, accepting the criticism. However, Madame Cortez continued, her expression softening slightly, you have musicality. You understand what Beethoven was trying to say. That cannot be taught. She turned to Mr. Harrington. Twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 4 o'clock. We'll start next week, Mr. Harrington smiled. Thank you, Isabella. Don't thank me yet, she replied dryly. You haven't seen my bill. She turned back to Elena. I expect focused practice between lessons. Scales and exercises daily, no exceptions. Are we clear? Yes, madam, Elena said, trying to contain her excitement. Good. I'll see you Tuesday at 4. With a nod to Mr. Harrington, she swept out of the room. When they were alone, Elena turned to her employer. Mr. Harrington, I don't know how to thank you. No thanks necessary. Madame Cortez is the best teacher in the city. If anyone can prepare you for that audition in a few months, it's her. He hesitated, then added, I've also taken the liberty of setting up a small trust to cover your sister's remaining tuition payments, should you decide to pursue your studies full-time. Elena stared at him, speechless. Consider it an investment in your future, he said simply. Sometimes people need a little help to reach their potential. I'm in a position to provide that help. Why? Elena finally managed to ask. Why are you doing all this? Mr. Harrington was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Because 3 weeks ago I treated a talented musician like a servant. I'd like to spend the next few months treating a talented servant like the musician she is. He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually stern face. Now I believe you have some practicing to do before your shift begins. And I have a party to prepare for. As he left, Elena remained seated at the piano, her fingers resting lightly on the keys. 3 weeks ago, she had been ordered to perform, treated as just another household convenience. Now she was being given a chance to reclaim her dreams, to build a life around music again. She began to play, softly at first, then with growing confidence. Notes that had been buried for years rose into the air, free at last. 1 year later, Elena stood in the wings of the university concert hall, taking deep breaths to calm her racing heart. Through the gap in the curtains, she could see the packed audience, students, faculty, family members, and music lovers from across the city. Somewhere out there, Lucia was watching, having flown in from Mexico just yesterday for this special occasion. 5 minutes. Miss Reyes, the stage manager whispered, clipboard in hand. Elena nodded, smoothing down the front of her simple black concert dress. How far she had come in a single year. From cleaning floors to standing, backstage at her first solo recital as a scholarship student at the university's prestigious music program. The past 12 months had been the most challenging and rewarding of her life. Madame Cortez had been as demanding as promised, pushing Elena to her limits during their twice-weekly lessons. There had been tears, frustration, and moments when Elena wondered if she was fooling herself. But there had also been breakthroughs, moments of pure musical connection, that reminded her why she had fallen in love with the piano as a child. Her audition for the university scholarship had gone well, so well that they had offered her not only admission but a place in their honors program. Now, at the end of her first year, she had been selected to give this recital, a recognition usually reserved for advanced students. A movement in the wings opposite caught her attention. Dr. Laurent stood there, giving her an encouraging nod. Beside him was Mr. Harrington, looking surprisingly nervous on her behalf. So much had changed between them. After she had been accepted to the university, Elena had reduced her hours at the mansion to just weekends, focusing on her studies during the week. Mr. Harrington had insisted on keeping her position open, though the work had shifted from housekeeping to helping organize his extensive music library and occasionally playing at small gatherings he hosted. The stage manager appeared again. It's time, Miss Reyes. With a final deep breath, Elena stepped onto the stage. The lights were bright, the audience a blur of faces. She made her way to the gleaming concert grand piano at center stage and took her bow. As she sat down at the bench and positioned her hands, the hall fell completely silent. Elena's program was challenging. Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, and a contemporary piece she had helped one of the composition students develop. As she began the Bach prelude, her nerves melted away, replaced by complete focus on the music. This was where she belonged, where she had always belonged. Midway through the program came the piece that meant the most to her, Chopin's Ballad No. 1 in G minor. It was the piece she had first played for her piano teacher back home when she was just 10 years old. The piece she had performed at her conservatory audition, and now, the centerpiece of her first real recital. As she played, memories flashed through her mind. Her father's proud face when she won her first competition, her mother's hands guiding hers across the keys when she was very small, Lucia's encouraging letters during the difficult early days in this country, Jorge and the kitchen staff cheering her on, Mrs. Porter's rare smile, Madame Cortez's grudging approval when she finally mastered a difficult passage, and Mr. Harrington's transformation from demanding employer to unexpected patron. When the final notes of her program faded away, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the applause began growing until it filled the hall. Elena rose from the bench, her face flushed with emotion, and bowed deeply. As she straightened, she saw the audience rising to their feet. A standing ovation. Her eyes searched the crowd until she found Lucia in the third row, clapping wildly, tears streaming down her face. Next to her was Jorge, who had asked for the evening off to attend. Several rows back, she spotted Mrs. Porter sitting straight-backed but smiling broadly. Elena bowed again and made her way off stage, her heart so full it might burst. In the wings, Dr. Laurent was the first to congratulate her. Magnificent, my dear. Truly magnificent. Thank you for believing in me, she said, her voice thick with emotion. The belief was the easy part, he replied. The work was all yours. Next came Madame Cortez, who merely nodded and said, acceptable. The Bach was rushed in places. Coming from her, this was high praise indeed. Finally, Mr. Harrington approached, holding a bouquet of white lilies. These are for you, he said, handing her the flowers. Though they hardly seem adequate, they're beautiful. Thank you. They stood in awkward silence for a moment. So much had changed between them, yet some things remained difficult to express. Your sister came to see me yesterday, Mr. Harrington said finally. Elena looked up in surprise. Lucia, why? She wanted to thank me for helping you. I told her that I had very little to do with your success. That's not true, Elena protested. Without my support, you would have found another way, he interrupted gently. People like you always do. All I did was make the path a little smoother. Before she could respond, they were joined by a tall man in a well-cut suit whom Elena recognized as the dean of the music department. Miss Reyes, congratulations on a superb performance, he said, shaking her hand warmly. I wonder if I might steal you away for a moment. There are some people I'd like you to meet, potential donors for our scholarship program who were very impressed by your playing. Of course, Elena replied. She turned to Mr. Harrington. Will you excuse me? Certainly. We'll talk later. As she followed the dean back toward the reception area, Elena glanced over her shoulder to see Mr. Harrington watching her go. A complex expression on his face, pride mixed with something like wistfulness. The reception was a whirlwind of introductions, compliments, and conversations about music. Elena moved through it in a happy daze, still riding the high of her successful performance. Eventually, she managed to break away to find Lucia, who enveloped her in a fierce hug. I am so proud of you, her sister whispered, her accent thicker than usual with emotion. Mama and Papa would be too. I couldn't have done it without you, Elena said. Your support kept me going during the hardest days. Lucia laughed, wiping away happy tears. Me? I just sent encouraging texts. You did all the hard work. And now you're doing yours, Elena said proudly. Dr. Lucia Reyes, almost ready to graduate. 6 more months, Lucia confirmed with a grin. And then I start my residency. Jorge appeared with a glass of sparkling cider for each of them. A toast to the Reyes sisters, he proclaimed. Taking the medical and music worlds by storm, they clinked glasses laughing together. It felt surreal to Elena, standing here in a concert hall celebrating her performance, surrounded by people who valued her art. A far cry from cleaning toilets and mopping floors. Later, as the reception was winding down, Elena spotted Mr. Harrington speaking with Madame Cortez in a quiet corner. The older woman was actually smiling, a rare sight indeed. As Elena approached, she heard Mr. Harrington ask, So you think she has a future in this? She has already proven that, Madame Cortez replied firmly. The question now is how far she will go. She nodded at Elena. Ah, here is our pianist now. I will leave you two to talk. As Madame Cortez moved away, Mr. Harrington turned to Elena. Your teacher thinks very highly of you, though she'd probably rather walk barefoot over hot coals than admit it directly to you. Elena laughed. That sounds like Madame Cortez. They moved toward the large windows overlooking the campus, away from the remaining guests. I have a confession to make, Mr. Harrington said after a moment. The night of that dinner party when I ordered you to play, I was so angry about the canceled pianist that I wanted someone to humiliate. I thought you would stumble through a simple tune. The guests would be underwhelmed and I could blame the evening's failure on you. Elena was surprised by his candor. I suspected as much. It was cruel and small-minded of me. He looked out the window, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. Instead, you taught me a lesson I badly needed to learn. What lesson was that? That I had surrounded myself with remarkable people and never bothered to see them. He turned to her. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. How many others in my household staff have hidden talents I've never bothered to discover? How many dreams am I overlooking? Elena smiled. Is that why Jorge is now taking business classes with your encouragement? And why Mrs. Porter's nephew received a scholarship to engineering school, yes. Mr. Harrington actually looked a bit embarrassed. I may have become somewhat invested in helping my staff pursue their educational goals. It suits you, Elena said honestly. Much better than yelling about misplaced appetizer trays. He laughed, a genuine laugh that transformed his once intimidating face. I have a proposition for you, Elena. One I hope you'll consider. What's that? I'm establishing a foundation to help talented young musicians who lack financial resources. Nothing huge. Just a few scholarships each year. Some performance opportunities. Mentorship connections. I'd like you to be involved. To help identify deserving candidates, perhaps even teach occasionally. Elena stared at him. You want me to help run a music foundation? Who better? You understand both the talent and the barriers. And it would be part-time, of course. Something to complement your studies, not interfere with them. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by Dr. Laurent. Excuse me, but there's someone else who would like to meet you. Elena. He gestured toward a distinguished-looking couple waiting nearby. The conductor of the National Symphony and his wife are in town for a conference. They attended your recital and were quite impressed. Elena's eyes widened. The National Symphony was one of the most prestigious orchestras in the country. Go, Mr. Harrington said with a smile. We can discuss the foundation another time. Tonight is about celebrating your achievement. As Elena walked away with Dr. Laurent, she glanced back at Mr. Harrington. He raised his glass in a small salute, and she smiled in return. How strange life was, how unexpected its twists and turns. A year ago, she had been a maid ordered to perform for a wealthy man's amusement. Today, she was a musician being introduced to a symphony conductor, with possibilities stretching out before her like an open road. Later that night, after all the guests had gone and the concert hall was quiet, Elena returned to the stage. The cleaning crew had already come through, but they had left the piano uncovered at her request. She sat down at the bench, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. Thank you, she whispered to the empty hall, to the piano, to whatever twist of fate had turned a moment of humiliation into the first step toward a new life. Then she began to play, not Chopin or Bach or Beethoven this time, but a simple folk melody her father used to whistle while he worked. As the sweet, familiar notes filled the empty hall, Elena closed her eyes and let the music carry her home, to her past, her present, and the future that now shimmered with promise before her.